Today we will be drawing a house in one-point perspective. This one was done by a 5th grade student last year. Your learning goal says I can create a drawing that utilizes perspective. Okay, boys and girls, that word perspective should be sounding familiar to you. Can you think of what art project we did this year where we used perspective? You remember this project. We did your names using one-point perspective to make them look like they were going back into the distance. There are 3 concepts that you need to understand in order to do this project successfully. The first one is space. Space is one of the 7 elements of art that artists use, and we will be using it today to help show depth on our flat paper. 3-dimensional is the next term. A lot of people describe it as popping out or having sides, but actually there's 3 dimensions that you should be able to name. Can you name the 3 dimensions of a cube? 3-dimensional means having length, width, and height. Now let's talk about one-point perspective. The word perspective means your point of view. So if you were looking down on a city, you'd have a bird's eye view of the city. But if you were standing below looking up, you might call that a worm's eye view. Using perspective gives us a way of creating distance on a flat piece of paper. So one-point perspective is a technique used in art to show distance from a certain viewpoint. One-point perspective uses 1 vanishing point. There's other types of perspective with more vanishing points, like the 2-point and 3-point shown here. Let's get familiar with some of the vocabulary. We're going to need to know these words in order to follow my directions. Think about it. Do you actually know the names of all the line directions? The horizon line is where the land meets the sky, and it's also horizontal. The vanishing point is the one point on the horizon line where all of our vanishing lines meet. Notice there's a vanishing point in the middle of that paper where all the lines seem to go. And in this scene, the entire picture is leading towards the vanishing point. Now we're ready for you to demonstrate your knowledge of horizon lines, vanishing points, and one-point perspective as you follow along with the video to create distance in your scene. You're going to start at the vanishing point and draw 2 diagonal lines. One goes to the left, one goes to the right, and this will create a road. It gives the illusion that the road is getting narrower and narrower as it gets farther and farther away from us. Look at that! You're using the element of art called space, and you're creating depth. Now I'm drawing mine without a ruler or any straight edge, but I think that you might want to use a straight edge. So if you don't have a ruler handy, you can always use the side of an envelope or a piece of paper that's been folded to give a nice stiff straight edge. Notice I'm connecting the corner of my building or the square part of the building to the vanishing point, and I'm also doing that to the top point of the building. Everything right now is going to the vanishing point. Those are called vanishing lines. We're going to draw a vertical line that's parallel to the front of the house and a diagonal line right here that's parallel to the roof of the house. And then I'm going to erase all the leading lines that go beyond that point. So make sure you have an eraser at the end of your pencil. You also could erase the horizon line that is going through the middle of the house. We don't need that anymore. See, it's starting to make more sense now. There's a building on the grass with a road going right by it, very close. Look at that. You just used perspective to make your house look 3-dimensional. It now has height, length, and width. You could take a moment to draw in some of the doors and windows of the house and be creative. You can put curtains in the windows or make the windows semicircles. Now I'm going to put some hills above the horizon line and maybe some mountains in the distance. This just helps build more space and more depth to my scene. It's time for you to critique the work of your peers. There's something wrong with these pictures. Take a close look at both of them and tell me what you think is wrong and how it could be fixed. You can see from these examples that is a common problem. The telephone poles need to be straight up and down and drawn with a ruler or a straight edge. They should always be parallel to the edge of your paper. And the vanishing lines always need to be erased at the end. If you would like to replace the telephone poles with trees, you're welcome to do that, but they also have to get smaller and smaller and stay within the vanishing lines that we're about to draw. Now I'm going to use that ruler or straight edge from my envelope and draw a vanishing line for the bottom of all of my telephone poles. And another line that goes upward from the vanishing point. Those will eventually be erased. They're just guidelines for where to put the poles. The poles are going to be vertical, so make sure they're going straight up and down, and they're always parallel to the edge of your paper. Don't let them go slanted. I'm doing the tops of the telephone poles now. Now, if this was a real scene with telephone poles, the ones closest to us would always seem thicker or wider than the ones that are far away. So I'm going to take a moment now and just fill in my close telephone poles. They'll become more of a rectangle. Instead of looking so skinny, they're going to have a little thickness to them. And you can pause the video at any time you want and catch up. And then resume the video when you're ready to move on. Don't forget to erase your vanishing lines when you're done. They're really not part of the picture. They're just to help us know where to put the base of every telephone pole so that it's going towards the vanishing point. But it's not actually part of the scene. Right now I'm going to make a little walkway that leads from the door to the road, and I'll even put a little mailbox down here. Look how I make that little loop, and there it looks 3D now. I'm just creating a little pond in the field across from the house. You don't have to do that, but maybe you can think of something you'd like to put over there, like a cow. Now I'm going to make a little fence that goes behind the house. Try this. I first make vertical posts and then horizontal posts that connect them. And by overlapping the house in front of the fence, it also helps to build some distance in the scene. Take another look at the 7 elements of art. The elements of art are like the building blocks for artists to use to create their pictures, and they don't always use every single one all the time. But it's possible that you could use every single one in this project. One of these elements is the most important part for today's lesson. Which one have we been focusing on today? Now let's review some of the critical content you should have learned from today. Hello, 5th grade. It's time to continue on with our lesson on one-point perspective. So we're going to be using more of the elements of art today, like color and texture and value. And we've already used space and line and shapes and forms. So today, let's start by outlining everything that you've drawn so far. You're not going to outline the leading lines that lead to the vanishing point unless it's part of your project. So a lot of those have been erased already. So outline first in black marker. And then you're going to use whatever colors you have at home, whether it's crayon or colored pencil, watercolor paints, or markers, and color in as much of the picture as you can. So that's the color. Value is when you change the lightness or darkness of a color. So you might press very hard with the crayon to make it darker and press very lightly to lighten the value. Or if you have 2 different color greens, you could use a darker green marker and a lighter green marker. And texture, if you drew any telephone poles or maybe the roof or the chimney of your house, you could draw repeated lines to look like shingles or bark on a tree or wood grain on the poles. In grass, you could repeat lines again and again to create the texture of the grass. Well, let's see how you do now while you continue working on your project, and then I need you to upload a photo so I can see the work. Have fun. The first thing I'm doing here is taking a black permanent marker and outlining everything that I drew. I'm going to speed it up a little bit so it goes faster, but take your time and try to stay on the lines. The reason I'm using permanent marker is because I don't have any crayons or markers available right now, so I'm going to use watercolor paint to color mine in. And if you plan on painting over yours, you're going to always want to use permanent marker so it doesn't get ruined when it gets wet. As soon as the whole thing's drawn, you can use whatever you want to color it in. So if you have crayons, colored pencils, markers, or paint, use whatever you would like to color in your picture. I'm adding the texture to my roof, the chimney, the house, the shingles, even this little walkway. I'm adding a little stone texture to it by repeating shapes and lines. Here's the set of watercolor paints I have available and some water and a brush. And I'm just going to wet my colors and quickly apply some color to my picture. If the paint comes out too dark like it just did on my road, you can just spread that around or add a little bit of water to it. This is if you're using watercolor paints. Most of you probably don't have watercolor paints at home. I'm just going to paint right over the top of those telephone poles because I can do those later. I want to use green for the grass too, but I don't want it to be the exact same green, so I add a little bit of yellow to my green. So there's some variety and it becomes a lighter value of green. I'm going to get a little blue into the water, and I don't care if it gets on top of my poles for now. Some more yellow and green mixed together for the grass. I hope you're having as much fun with this as I am. This is very relaxing. I think I'll add a little bit of brown to my stones. A little green for the hedges I put around the house. Now this might not be a great idea with watercolor paint. I'm painting the brown poles and the wood from the mailbox, and it's starting to leak into my surrounding color. So with watercolor paint, you really don't want to touch another area that's still wet, or it leaks into the wrong space. I have to be very, very careful when I put some brown on my telephone poles that I just make it real thin and stay in the middle so my whole picture doesn't turn into a big brown mess. All right, mine looks pretty good. I think I'm done here. Send me a picture of your masterpiece as soon as you complete it, and congratulations on making your learning goal.